Hello and welcome to Higher Automation, brought to you by Hai Robotics. I'm your host, Michelle Dawn Mooney. Today, we are exploring how goods-to-person robotic systems are transforming modern manufacturing. These cutting-edge technologies, specifically automated storage and retrieval systems, or ASRS, often seen in e-commerce and logistics distribution facilities, are increasingly popping up along production lines to streamline labor, improve workforce efficiencies, and drive the future of smart factories. I have three great guests for this conversation today. Alex Swary is Solutions Design Lead for Hy-Tek Intralogistics, Joe McGrath, Solutions Design Lead, Hy-Tek Intralogistics, and George Peach, Technical Sales Executive for Hai Robotics USA. Thank you all for being with me today.
Thanks for having us.
Looking forward to getting into the conversation. So let's start here. Can you give us an overview of goods-to-person systems like ASRS and their role in modern manufacturing? What are these systems bringing, no pun intended, to today's production environments?
Yeah, an ASRS is an automatic storage and retrieval system. So there's a lot of flavors of this. Anytime you have to automatically put some products away and then bring them back without any human intervention, you consider that an ASRS. There's some old traditional technologies that do this, like cranes, but there's a lot of new stuff hitting the market that's robotics based and very, very effective, like opening up a lot of market opportunities where we kind of see these things happening. I think in production facilities specifically, we see lots of line side buffering applications for ASRS. So we'll go ahead and store things that the line's going to need later in the future. We'll hold it until the right time and let it go. We'll also see some type of kitting operations where they kind of run through and like build up specified sets of parts and then hold onto those parts for the operation later on.
So the applications we see, as Joe kind of touched on it, this isn't the direct handling of the production items or the manufacturing process itself. It's usually a lot of the what we'll call wasted work or wasted costs associated with moving product to and from given areas within the production area. So as Joe mentioned, product being stored, being prepped for production, line side replenishment, or product that's in work and being prepped and staged for a next step, that process down the line.
So you mentioned, Alex, line side replenishment. Let's dig a little deeper into some of these key applications. How exactly do these systems handle line side replenishment in a dynamic manufacturing environment?
Sure. So in a heavily automated automotive type application where the production lines, going back to Industry 2.0 and 3.0, have been automated for some time now, a lot of times the process of bringing new product or product that needs to be consumed at that production line is still pretty manual setup. There's very clean operations that can be established and put in place to enable continuous flow of product to that production line, but goods-to-person systems such as Hai Robotics enable automating that and connecting it to the rest of the production process and then upstream to the overall supply chain. In addition to line side applications, there's also tool room and back of store type setups where you get parts staged. Typically, for tool room type applications, for example, a very high variety of product, ranging anywhere from first aid type pieces of material all the way up to end mills, tool bits, tooling, things like that, where your variety of products can be very high as opposed to consumables where you're likely turning the same number of products every day, especially in an automotive type environment. So this same type of ASRS or goods-to-person application could be designed and leveraged for both situations and be a huge benefit to the production environment.
I think there's some obvious like fits for an automatic storage and automatic retrieval, especially when you have these huge SKU counts too. Like imagine needing to go find a case of some PPE. You could spend an hour looking for that in a facility that the locations aren't quite so obvious or the documentation isn't quite so good. In an ASRS, you just ask it to bring it to you and it brings it exactly the same spot every time and exactly when you need to. And then we might talk about it a little bit later on, but kind of an additional benefit is removing the labor. You also have this huge amount of reactivity. So as before, you might, say, give me a case of something and wait an hour for it, or you might need to say, trigger that replenishment an hour before I need it because it's going to take me that long to get it. And some of these solutions, an ASRS can bring you something within minutes of the request. So now your planning cycle is much simplified, or you don't have an operator standing around for an hour waiting for a pair of PPE to get it on with his day.
Another good benefit is the storage density of these applications is much higher than traditional manual storage, I'll say shelf level solutions where you've got aisles where an operator has to walk up and down to hunt for a part. Sometimes that storage is often off-site, even not in the same facility as where the production is. So what goods to person can enable is bringing that product closer to the production area. And to Joe's point about faster reactivity, physically bringing the product closer to where it's needed can be part of that solution as well.
And really, all coming back to time is money, right? Because if you're making it simpler, you don't have to have as many people necessarily there and you're reducing that time. It's a win win all around. So let's talk about kitting and buffering, two processes that are especially important in high precision or complex production environments like aerospace or automotive. How do G2P systems come into play here?
Yeah, so for kitting, we talked about line side replenishment. In the high replenishment or high frequency replenishment setups, you don't really consider that kitting. The kitting is going to be occurring in applications such as aerospace, like you mentioned, where you're not necessarily cranking out a car, a jet engine, for example, every 53 seconds. It might be one every month or two, depending on the configuration, and then high configuration variability. So you're not using the same products every day or every few minutes even. So being able to kit and prep for the next production setup in advance, shortly before it's needed, and then stage it and prep it directly back into the same system, such as a goods to person, it's a huge benefit. In more manual setups, you're going to go and pick all the product you need to build that kit or sub-assembly, for example, and then stage it somewhere else. Whereas with goods to person, you can go pick all that product, re-induct it into the system, and then use it as a vending machine for the operator to go get and pick up his kit. So it's a huge benefit and huge flexibility to have a one-stop shop for all stages of that kitting process.
Yeah, it's a buffer that can hold, both the raw materials and that finished product. And because of that super high reactivity, you can wait until later in that time frame to transform the product. So you don't have to build a kit and then store it in the back room because it's going to take a week and a half to get that replenishment request through. You can build the kit, hold it for the amount of time you need to. And it kind of leads into this whole discussion of like buffering. We know that lots of supply chains are just this links of like activities and buffers and activities and buffers. And it becomes very poignant, like the smaller you get, like right next to like a system, like an automotive production system. How do you have the right amount of materials at the right time and in the right quantities? You don't want to drop off 15 pallets of valves next to a line, but that's going to be like 2 months worth of inventory. You want to get the 5 valves you need right now, and then the next part that you're going to need. So these like super reactive automatic storage retrieval systems or goods to person systems are an excellent solution to that. Like instead of having a giant warehouse way far away that has super long like lead time to get it over to the line and a lot of planning associated with like that lead time, have a very, very dense buffering system right next to the line that can fulfill a whole bunch of different functions, like letting you build kits in the same system that you're buffering the kits. That also gives you that just-in-time line-side delivery.
Let's talk about, one good point to the benefits of that. Obviously, the reactivity rate is huge. What that enables is potentially decreased inventory because you don't have to look so far ahead. So if you've got less product that's isn't ready to be sold immediately, that's going to help your bottom line as a company as well. If you don't have inventory sitting in your facility at nearly the same quantities.
There are definitely a few pain points here. So what are some of the biggest challenges manufacturers face with tool and spare parts management, and how are ASRS solutions improving these processes?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think this process and these problems can look very similar to what we see in traditional fulfillment and distribution centers, right? So a common, hurdle and common roadblock that we see in all distribution and manufacturing facilities is having the right product in the right quantity at the right place and the right time. So the big difference between a distribution facility and a production facility would be your end customer and the quantities maybe that you're looking at, right? So in a distribution facility, we're going to be looking at our end customer of ourselves, right? Whoever's purchasing the material either online or at the store, and the end customer in a production facility is going to be that line side production, that production area or sell wherever you're going to the warehouse, right? So maybe a little bit different demand forecasting, a little bit different product management, but the same challenges arise, right? Right product, right quantity, right place, right time. And ensuring that these components in a manufacturing facility are available at the right time is even more critical, because if there's any downtime in a production facility, that is time and money throughout the whole process, right? So if the manufacturing line doesn't have what they need, that is costing them money every second that it's not there.
So with inventory and spare parts, and with any application with it for goods to person within manufacturing, a lot of times it adds visibility to where product is within a building. Sometimes supply chain, those in charge from start to finish of a product life cycle, your visibility to a product might disappear once it enters the building, and you won't know when it leaves until it leaves on the final assembly or the finished product. So having a goods-to-person system with the digital connectivity capability that you don't necessarily have with a manual setup, that can be a huge benefit to the overall supply chain, as George touched on the product planning, right? Knowing where your product is at all times, it helps enable that supply chain getting lean, right? And just-in-time manufacturing as well.
Okay, so one more challenge I'd touch on here is typically in distribution facilities, we see high ceilings, right? So we see a lot of 30-foot, 40-foot clear ceilings, which is very applicable for and easy to install traditional ASRS systems. When we look at your typical production facilities, they typically and historically have a much lower ceiling height just due to the nature of the buildings. And a huge benefit to overcome that challenge is with GTP and ASRS automation due to the flexibility of some of the systems in the market today. So your traditional cranes and mini loads and things like that you needed extremely high ceilings did not ever apply into manufacturing facilities due to their low clear height. So having the new options that are in our market today, like Hai Robotics and other goods-to-person solutions, has been a big improvement for the applications that can go into the production facilities.
And speaking of improvements, clearly there are challenges in the industry, but we have solutions, right? So we're making things better and easier. So let's take a look forward. How are these technologies really setting customers up for long-term success?
I think a lot of these, especially robotics-based ASRS solutions, do a couple of things that traditionally have been difficult to do, and that is in flexibility and scalability. So talking about flexibility first, and George touched on this briefly, sometimes you have to put a system into a space that is really chopped up. You go into a big greenfield distribution center and the sky is the limit, literally, sometimes. And so you can just make a big giant square of stuff and it's very, very efficient. But you go into an automotive plant and or any type of manufacturing plant, and they have been using that building for quite a while. It's more of a brownfield situation. And maybe it's not so clear where all you can put it. You don't have to have a big rectangular box. You can move around corners. You have robots that can take lots and lots of different types of paths and still maintain efficiency or high throughputs and high storage density. And so you can eke out a lot more in a building that isn't necessarily as optimal, at first glance. And I think another really, really big thing that's setting customers up for success, especially if they use a system like this, is its ability to scale in the future. Nobody has a crystal ball. We can't predict what all the future scenarios are going to be. And as much control over a supply chain as a manufacturer may have, things change, customer preferences change, new technologies come out, and that changes how they have to use systems. And that's going to change what all the order characteristics are. And a robotics-based system, and this is very, very different from the traditional types of ASRs, like cranes and stuff. You can scale storage independently of scaling throughput, and you can have much smaller increments of scale as well. So I can add one robot to a system and I can get just a little bit of extra throughput out of the system, and it's not a big capital investment, and it's very easy to justify, and it's very easy to make that system balance a lot easier versus I need some more throughput out of a bank of mini loads. I'd have to add an entire aisle to get one more crane, and then I have to buy storage with that, and it's a very large increment of purchase. And so a lot of those projects are harder to do, they're harder to get justified, and they're definitely much more intrusive to go ahead and execute. So I think Hai is actually really well set up and positioned in that space to do a lot of that work. It's very scalable, super flexible.
Any closing thoughts as we're wrapping up here?
No, I think Joe covered most of that, right? So looking at all environments for ASRs and GTP, the biggest commonalities, I think, and that we keep mentioning is the flexibility and the scalability, right? Whether it's a manufacturing and production facility or your distribution facility, it is very clear that automation, robotics, and goods to person is the future. And everyone's business case is going to be slightly different, especially in the production and manufacturing facilities. Your ROI is going to be a lot different than it is in a distribution facility. But I think it's fair to say that there are a numerous amount of options available for all facilities out there in today's market.
I want to thank all of our guests today. Alex Swary, Solutions Design Lead, Hy-Tek Intralogistics, Joe McGrath, Solutions Design Lead, Hy-Tek Intralogistics, and George Peach, Technical Sales Executive for Hai Robotics USA. Great conversation. Thank you for your time and being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening to Higher Automation, a podcast brought to you by Hai Robotics. Of course, you can visit Hai's website, hirobotics.com, for more information and resources there. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm your host, Michelle Dawn Mooney. We hope to connect with you on another podcast soon.